Board Special Topic Tuesday for March 8th, 2022.
Welcome, 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 beloved community. And we are here not on our regular Wednesdays, but on a Tuesday with a very special segment that will be known as Special Topic Tuesday. And today we have some information that is vital to everyone in the city of Detroit. And we have as our guest to tell us this information, our very own member of the People's Water Board Coalition, our pretty much fearless captain of this ship that we sail through grassroots organizing. She is also a longstanding member and activist with Michigan Welfare Rights Organization, Ms. Sylvia Orduno. Thank you so much for being here, Sylvia, with me and my co-host, Valerie Jean. And I'm gonna shoot it right on over to Valerie Jean so we can just jump into what we're having for Special Topic Tuesday.
Thanks, Nicole, and thank you so much, Sylvia, for such short notice, really, to get on the show today and talk about the water rate increases that are happening in Detroit. And, you know, really, we wanted to talk about what it would look like for communities and things like that. It was such an important conversation to have. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a delight to be here. Thanks for that kind introduction.
It was great. It was perfect. So it's only a half-hour show. We're gonna get right into it. You know, really, what would a water rate increase mean to families who are already having a hard time making their ends meet?
Yeah, and this is a thing that I think is a little bit surprising to all of us still, right? Is that we know that many low-income households are still coming out of the pandemic, that while a lot of people are saying it's over and the mask mandates are down, it doesn't mean that everyone has experienced the pandemic equally. And I think that we continue to have to be appreciative of the extra burdens that low-income households have had. That, you know, we know that for many residents where they had to homeschool kids, you know, the water bills go up, the food bills go up. For households that are also frontline workers, you know, they also didn't have the luxury of being able to just work from home, right? It really was a privilege for folks who could do that, which meant that they were also spending extra money just to try to get to the job from all of the demands of work. But I think that what we're seeing in these latest increases in water and sewage costs that GLWA just recently announced that are to take effect this July. In fact, let me just read through these. They're talking about 3.7% increase for water and 2.4% increase for sewer. That's a pretty high increase compared to what we'd also seen like in previous years. So for instance, been going back and looking again at the numbers over the previous years. And last year, they had an increase of 1.5% for water and actually a decrease of 0.6% for wastewater. But we know that all of the different wholesale customers that GLWA services, Detroit now being, you know, one of those, Detroit added 2% for water, but didn't increase sewage. So we know that all the different communities can add additional costs onto their bills. And so like in recent years, we've seen Birmingham increase on top of the GLWA rates, another 7% for their customers, right, for water, and then another 4.4% for sewer. And so, you know, we really learned a lot, especially from like the We the People research, where they were looking at all those additional costs that communities put on. And so there's also a lot of unevenness in what low-income people in other communities are having to pay. But we're really concerned that there's this pattern of continuing to still increase the water bills for low-income residents without a water affordability program.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's so important right now, especially with the looming ending of the moratorium. And I know that the moratorium has saved lives. There's no doubt about it. But if we can do a moratorium, then we can clearly implement a water affordability plan, right? If we can have people pay just $25 on their bill, as they have been since the moratorium started during the pandemic, then certainly we can implement a water affordability plan, and it has to be done.
Absolutely. And so we're hearing the mayor or the DWSD say that there's almost $100 million in arrearage bills since the pandemic that are due for collection from DWSD. But we also know that a lot of that is not low income households, right? So like you said, the city still has a moratorium that goes through the end of this year that the mayor again affirmed will be in place. But there are a lot of people that can't afford to pay their bills that are not. And so we want to make sure that when the city is looking at collections and trying to attribute who's responsible for what, that they really, again, separate out low-income households who have trouble paying from those who can, because we don't want people to start saying, well, so many people don't want to pay their bills, and that's why we're in this problem. It's like, no, let's again focus on low-income households.
They have to be the focus. Yeah, as both Nicole and I know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the thing is, I was wondering if, I noticed that you said that like, this is not just low income people. There are a lot of people who normally would be paying their bill in full, but they're not because they're under this $25 plan. So my thing is even with this large amount of arrearages, even if they were not low income, they're gonna be in the same boat, because you're gonna have this huge bill that is not gonna be,
Manageable.
anyway
Not
you
even
have
for people
any
who could normally
capacity to
afford,
pay.
right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're still going to be in the same boat as the low income residents. And I think that there needs to be something in place before December in order to do this without having everyone have a massive, massive water shutoff campaign in their communities.
Right. And
Very
if
true.
you see in Philadelphia and in Baltimore, it took time to do. There are systems and
Absolutely.
processes and things that have to be put in place. And
Yeah.
it, even with everybody on board, it took a long time to do. So this is not something like we can just flip a switch. Now we have a water affordability plan. It has to be really thought of and implemented in really a special way to make sure that we're not harming people, right?
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah, and like you said, we know that a lot of people who might not have experienced water affordability problems or even other energy problems, right, really struggled through the pandemic. And so we should also appreciate, where it is that people need help. And oftentimes those assistance programs like WRAP, the Water Residential Assistance Program, and other programs that are administered through utilities or other third-party programs can help residents with those temporary situations. But as you all know very well, we keep advocating for the needs for people who have long-term affordability. And so the example that you point out there about the tiered assistance program in Philadelphia, and just recently, last month, the one that was passed by Baltimore City Council. So those are good signs, but I think we're still very much frustrated, right? That those programs very much benefited off of the 2005 water affordability program that we got approved here by City Council, but was never implemented. And so wanting to get back to having this current council have it implemented. And can you believe it's actually been 5 years now since that Philadelphia plan kicked off? So there's actually a lot to learn too from the way that the program has been successful.
That's a tremendous amount of feedback to get from 5 years of this plan being successful. Definitely.
yeah.
So one last thing I just wanted to add about the water rate increases, I think as you all have heard, is the GLWA is saying that about half or 1.5% of the sewage increase is because of Highland Park debt, right? And so I know that that was something that you all were interested in. And so maybe we can just say a little bit more about that. Is that okay?
I'd like that, because they very publicly shamed Highland Park, right? Like the whole Detroit News article was about.
And it's been going on for several years, at least since 2016. The GLWA was formed in 2014, and then they had to take over debts from the city of Detroit. And so there's a lot of complications going on with the Highland Park system. You remember they had their own water treatment plant, right?
Yeah.
And so that was not able to continue to be operated when the city was going through its own problems with finance managers and such. But, we've been paying a little bit extra over the years from the Highland Park debt, but Highland Parkers for years have been disputing that and saying, look, we had a consent agreement that capped the amount of water debt, water bills we were supposed to have to pay. And so GLWA is saying, well, you know, that's not accurate anymore. But the city is saying, well, look, these are the legal agreements we have. And so the city, I know, has also been struggling for years to get collected revenue or collected debt from the state, you know, because they've got the Davison Highway and the Service Drive, and then like Woodward and parts of McNichols. Those are all areas that are covered by the county or by the state Department of Transportation, and they're supposed to pay for all of those runoff expenses. And so the city has been having trouble collecting and saying, look, if you actually collected from the state appropriately, we would also not be in this problem. So we want to make sure that like the residents that have their own affordability problems there aren't getting caught up in disputes with the courts and the state and GLWA, and you know, and making it sound as if residents there don't want to pay their bills, because that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, the whole situation there in Highland Park has been so complex, you know, especially once they got taken off of their own water treatment plant. And, you know, it's not the residents' fault. You know, they didn't have anything to do with it, but it all falls on them. And to publicly come out, it's just, it not only is it immoral, but it just opens the door and it tells the narrative that the people in Highland Park don't matter, right? So when you start shutting off their water en masse, you already set this narrative in place.
Yes.
You know, and well, they didn't, you know, those people, they didn't do right with their bills. They didn't, you know, all of them didn't do right with their bills. And that's what happened in Detroit. And you see it happening other places. That narrative has to be laid first. And it's criminal to do that to a whole community. It's absolutely criminal. It never, I don't understand it.
Highland Park has been for a long time a really vulnerable community. You know, we regularly hear too about that Detroit would love to annex Highland Park, and it's suffered for so many years, you know, with residents being able to pay their bills and not getting billed properly, and bills being threatened, huge bills being threatened to roll over under property taxes. And now there's a lot of, you know, houses that need help with their plumbing. And we know that a lot of low income residents there are also seniors. And so we've also got to pay attention to those needs, as well as what we've known over the years that Highland Park has to get out those lead service lines, you know, just like in Detroit and other places here in Southeast Michigan. But they've had in recent years the highest number of children with lead poisoning from the lead service lines. So those blood rate levels are something that, you know, they're constantly monitoring and we have to be concerned about. So there's lots of reasons that we need to figure out more how to help support the needs of Highland Park, especially around its infrastructure and water affordability. Yeah, we've got to advocate for them. We have to. I know that you talked about the water affordability plan a little bit, but I mean, there's a lot of ways that the city of Detroit and GLWA can think about protecting communities instead of harming them. We want and expect that they're going to be looking at a water affordability plan. Can you just kind of explain to folks who may not know just a little bit of history about the water affordability plan and how it could really save lives? Absolutely. So this work got started with Michigan welfare rights at the end of the last decade, actually, last century, I should say, coming out of welfare reform, right? We saw a lot of changes in the ways in which households were going to get assistance with utilities. And one of the changes was how much they would get assistance on their bills. And so we saw, especially around the turn of the century, a lot of households that had already been getting disconnected in Highland Park and in Detroit, not able to keep up with the cost of their bills. But a lot of people kept this, you know, inside the house. They didn't really share that what's going on with other people, with neighbors, or, you know, it's just kind of family secrets, right? And so we got to see over the years how people that would let us go into their homes were really living in squalor by not having water, right? Because you need water for everything, to cook, clean, you know, manage your household waste. And, you know, without it, it's a horrible way to live. But we saw also like incredible generosity from neighbors at the same time, where someone would let them run a water hose through the kitchen window and, you know, fill up some tubs or do the dishes and fill up, you know, the toilet containers, right, where you hold the water. So there was lots of good things that were going on. But we knew that, again, this wasn't anything that people could live with. What we had to focus on was the utilities, the water utilities have to provide water for low-income people based on what they can afford. So that's when we had started working with Michigan Legal Services and the Poverty Law Program at the University of Michigan, who went out and found Roger Colton. At the time, he'd been doing a lot of affordability programs for the energy sector. So utilities are providing natural gas and electricity. So when he came to Detroit and started talking with us and we were explaining to him the hardships that families were experiencing, he said, I think I can help. He's like, I've been doing this work with the energy sector. Let me see what I can put together here in Detroit. And so he met with activists, he met with the attorneys, he met with the city council members and the water department. And in 2005, came out with a plan that city council approved, but we never got implemented. Remember, those were really hard years too, especially when we had Mayor Kilpatrick in at the time, and the city was under all kinds of financial stressors and couldn't pay its bills. And, there were even wonders of whether or not we could afford to pay the payroll for fire and police department. And so, the hardship was experienced in many different ways, but especially low-income customers. We clearly made the case that if we don't do something here in the city of Detroit, we're going to have some real humanitarian crises on our hands. And we saw that play out over the years when water affordability did not get implemented.
Yeah, especially in 2013, 2014. Nicole and I both were shut off in 2014 or 2014.
I was shut off twice, actually, in 2014.
Yep. And that's when GLWA, when all the conversations were going around that, well, we've got to regionalize the Detroit water system, right? And so, there was a lot of pressure on Detroit to demonstrate that it was collecting from residents who weren't paying their bills. And of course, they assumed that people didn't want to pay their bills. And so that's when GLWA and people that wanted to form GLWA, I should say, and DWSD were really putting pressure to start those mass shutoffs, as you described there. And it was also in 2014 when we had gotten the attention of the United Nations, and when they eventually came here in the fall that year. And we took them on a tour around the city, and they got to talk with, residents like you and learn more about the affordability crisis. Mm-hmm. And we were so glad to hear them see what we'd been saying and talking about for years and called these human rights violations.
Well, they publicly said, you're standing in violation to the human right to water, to UN human right to water. Your whole city is. Absolutely. You can't do this to people. It's a life or death situation. Mm-hmm. I know that Nicole. Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you a question. You said you got shut off twice. I was shut off twice too. During that one time, they shut off my entire neighborhood, and I know that you experienced the same thing. Do you want to kind of share with folks what it was like when you were shut off?
I would say that it compares to living in a third world country, but most of the videos I've seen of third world countries, they at least have a river or a water source near them where they can go collect water. I didn't have that option. When my water got cut off the first time, I got absolutely no assistance from my neighborhood. And I know that a lot of people in my neighborhood were going through the same thing as well. DHS gave me absolutely no help, which is usually the first line of defense people go to. And then they connect them to other organizations. Got no help there at all. And it took two months and 2 days for my water to be restored. And that was only because one of the then officials with the water department had got on television and made all of these very, very distorted narrative comments about Detroiters, like, oh, they don't want to pay their bills. They're wearing, $500 gym shoes and $1,000 phones and got cable and fancy cars instead of paying their bills. And that helped push that narrative out there about residents, which was completely untrue. Mm-hmm. The one narrative that never seems to come out about the issues of water in Detroit is the continually increased rates.
That's right.
That go up. I remember at the height of our shutoffs, I started really getting involved in this, not just as a directly impacted resident, but as someone who felt like I needed to be a advocate for
Yeah.
what was going on because I brought the lived experience. I'm sure you felt the same way. And I learned that our rates had went up 8% each year for like over a 5-year, 5-year period. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that means our rates went up 40% in 5 years.
Yeah, it's no wonder. I mean, it's no wonder people can't pay their bills.
Exactly.
And they're
It's
already
true.
struggling. Yeah.
It's true. Especially before 2015 or so, the water rates and the sewage rates had been going up at least 9% every year. Just really completely unaffordable, right? We saw them that in the past almost 2 decades that the rates had gone up over 200%, right? Completely unsustainable for families. And so as you noted there, Nicole, right? A lot of people were affected in, pretty serious ways. One other thing that I wanted to note that I forgot about is that we didn't used to pay drainage fees, right? Or those stormwater fees. And when DWSD realized this was another fee that they could collect on, they started doing it a few years ago. And actually, even though we tend to focus on the water and the sewage fees, last year they went in increased that drainage fee 8.1%. And so we're going to have to start paying more attention to this. And so the way that they determined it is they had done aerial shots all over the city to see how long everyone's driveways were, because it's based on like an acreage fee. And so, a lot of people, at the time were confused because they're like, well, where did this new fee come from? And, and how do I know that it's even accurate? And so,
that's when all of a sudden the churches were interested in the water shutoffs. All of a sudden,
right?
Worried about
and
water
so
shutoffs.
Now it became another part of the bill you had to pay attention to, and you couldn't do anything to challenge that, right? Because they said, well, this is what we measured, then this is what you owe. And so I think as we're also talking more about like infrastructure, we're going to have to be thinking more about other ways to help low-income households control those bills. So the city had required, if you remember, like everyone had to disconnect their downspout, right?
Yeah.
That would drain from the house into like a pipe that would go down into the sewage. So that disconnect helped with reducing not only water that went in our combined sewer systems, but also help reduce some of the bills. So we've got to figure out too how to help get more of that kind of green infrastructure in our neighborhoods, but also help residents like drain more water onto their grass so that it's not draining into the sewage systems. So I think that that's going to be another area that we're going to want to pay more attention to around infrastructure, to see about how, again, to reduce that part of the bill for low-income households.
I know the churches did end up putting in rain gardens. Some of them did end up putting in rain gardens to
drain
help
that water.
Yeah, I know some of them.
And they got help. A lot of the churches got help from the mayor around that. So the the $50 million payment that the city gets every year as a lease payment from GLWA, I know that the mayor used a portion of that to help churches because they were complaining left and right. We can't afford these water bills and these new drainage fees, and you're crippling our churches. And a lot of smaller churches couldn't make it. They ended up folding, and so the mayor had come through and helped some of the churches be able to set up those new kind of drainage systems.
Yeah, imagine if they'd came out during the mass water shutoffs when communities were being shut off. How powerful that would have been for us, why we were fighting in the streets, if they'd have been there for us.
Yes.
And their communities that
Absolutely.
they reside in. Because that's, anyway, you can tell I'm still a little salty about it.
So Sylvia, I've noticed since I've come into this work that part of the distorted narrative and that keeps a lot of vocal confrontation going on between residents is that suburbanites have had this ideology that their bills increase because people in Detroit don't pay their bills. So I noticed you said GLWA went up on the rates. Can you just tell our viewers, like, who are the people that GLWA is going to raise rates to kind of show how widespread their net is cast?
Sure. So GLWA, the Great Lakes Water Authority, they've got, I think it's about 88 customers now, municipal wholesale customers. So they leased, again, the water system from Detroit back in 2015, I think was when the agreement was signed. And so for 40 years, they're operating our system and they're also setting the rates. So one of the reasons too that they said that they had to increase the rates this time around is because they've also got to pay for, the higher salaries of their kind of skilled operators. They've also got these additional costs that they're having to pay for because of these kind of like supply chain problems. We keep hearing about things that are backed up at the ports and materials that they need to be able to deal with all the infrastructure, but also, this aging infrastructure here. And so not only Detroit, but a lot of communities that are served by GLWA have lead service lines that have to get out of the ground. They've got water and sewage mains that have to be repaired or replaced. And that all costs a whole lot of money, as we all know. And so one of the things I think we're going to also have to pay attention to, especially around the issues of affordability, is that, we've been doing a lot of work over the years to talk to our representatives in Congress to get those additional monies to come to the state of Michigan and across the country, right? To help with the lead service line removal, to deal with the water and sewer main replacements. And so there are millions of dollars, billions of dollars really actually right now in the legislature that are being decided about what kinds of projects that those funds are going to go to and to what communities. And so GLWA is saying, for instance, that's not even enough money. And we sort of knew that, which is why they're also saying that they need the additional rate increases. But we're not giving enough information as customers, as residents, to say, where are you spending the money, right, on infrastructure? And what are your priorities? Which parts of the community are you going to be working on first? And I know that when we, were part of these lead and copper rule revision webinars last year with EPA, you'll remember this, Nicole. We told them, look, we really need to get these lead service lines out in neighborhoods where we've got low-income families and kids are not only having to deal with the possible water contamination with lead, that leaches into their drinking water. Even though DWSD says, oh, we've got perfectly good water, we know that we're all exposed in some way with having those lead service lines.
Right.
They have prioritized, the city has prioritized instead new water main and sewage main development down in the midtown and downtown area, right? So they've prioritized there and left these lead service lines in many of our communities. And we don't want to see
you don't care without saying it.
We
right?
don't want to see more kids we're drinking out of lead lines and prioritizing other development.
That's because the Midtown area, or as most of us Detroiters probably know it as, Cass Corridor, is now a highly gentrified area.
Yeah.
Right.
Highly. So that's why they're concentrating on it in that area, particularly because out here in the neighborhood, it's just us, lowly, indispensable, people that they deem dispensable. And it's okay, I guess, if we get poisoned. That's how I feel WSD.
And Detroit fought back really hard on that when a lot of advocates and environmental groups had gotten those lead and copper rule changes here in Michigan. You'll remember Detroit and GLWA and the city of Livonia sued to challenge that and said, no, that's an unfounded mandate and you can't make us do that. And it'll raise water rates double digits and it'll, cause more people to be put at risk. And so they lost that fight in the court. And so what they're doing now is they're using state revolving fund loans to take out the lead service lines. And so we also, again, another area for us to watch is that they say, oh, well, we're doing this for you free, but you're not, because you took out loans that you're going to just have us pay back through our water bills. Yeah. And so we've got to keep watching for all these increases that go on for all of the different infrastructure repairs too.
Definitely.
Well, that's a really great way to end. And for a call to action for folks, look out for each other. Really, really check on your neighbors. check on your elders, make sure that they have access to clean, affordable water. And if they don't, join the fight to get join the fight to get it. That's really where we're at with it. The People's Water Board opposes any kind of rate increases without having things in place that will save people, that will make sure people are not harmed by it.
Right.
We oppose any of those things. Monica Lewis Patrick always says, find a good fight and get in it. And this is it.
Yeah.
This is the fight of our lives. It's the fight of our time. And thank you, Sylvia, for coming on and kind of having this conversation with us. Like I said, short notice. We will still be having our regular broadcast, Water Wednesday broadcast tomorrow. We'll be talking to to Representative Pulowski, and it's going to be really important conversation to have. We're going to be talking about the legislation and things like that.
Yeah. And we've got some champions in the Michigan legislature, so we want to make sure we support them.
Yeah.
And to all our viewers, I just ask that you get this video out, share it through your social medias, share it through text message links with your neighbors, because here's the thing. The way to fight is to find out all the information that you can get and then use it against the enemy.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Until next time, my friends, take care of each other and try to stay afloat. Bye.
Bye.